Morn, waked by circling hours, with rosy hand unbarred the gates of light, and now went forth the morn such as in highest heaven from before her vanished night, shot through with orient beams. War, he perceived, war in procinct. A voice from midst a golden cloud was heard. Go, Michael, of celestial armies prince, and thou, Gabriel, lead forth to battle these my sons invincible. Lead forth my armed saints, by thousands and by millions ranged for fight. So spake the sovereign voice. Clouds began to darken all the hill, and smoke to roll in dusky wreaths, reluctant flames, the sign of wrath, awaked. The loud ethereal trumpet from on high 'gan blow, at which command the powers militant that stood for heaven moved on in silence their bright legions. At last, far on the horizon to the north appeared from skirt to skirt a fiery region stretched in battleless aspect, the banded powers of Satan hasting on with furious expedition. The shout of battle now began, high in the midst, exalted as a god, the apostate in his sun-bright chariot sat. So, right off the bat, I feel like I need to point out that this line here, these lines that suggest that the armies of God are marching on in silence and that the armies of Satan are emitting this shout of battle. This is a somewhat direct reference to Homer's Iliad. In Book 3 of the Iliad, we have this line at the beginning of Book 3. Now with squadrons marshaled, captains leading each, the Trojans came with cries and the din of war like wildfowl. But the Greeks came on strong in silence, breathing combat fury, hearts ablaze to defend each other to the death. So this is interesting because the interpretation that commentators have made regarding, as far as the Iliad is concerned, that the Trojans emit a war cry and the Greeks march in silence. Gotthold Ephraim Lessing, the great German writer of the 18th century, in his book Laocoon, he states that the commentary has been that Homer is suggesting that the Trojans are barbaric and that the Greeks are civilized. And so we may wonder if Milton is doing the same thing. He's depicting Satan's armies as barbaric and God's armies as civilized. And of course that makes sense. That makes perfect sense. But I think there's a conversation to be had here, and I'm not going to dwell on it too long, that in this stage of history, that the European barbaric past is not shunned and that it's actually being embraced in other parts of Europe. I'm not sure how they felt about it in England. But take Rembrandt, for example, and take the Dutch culture in their golden age in the 17th century. They embraced their old Batavian past for the fact that the Batavians, as they saw them and as they were reported in the historian Tacitus, resisted the Empire of Rome. And so the Dutch viewed that as being part of their heritage, that they are ancestrally inclined towards resisting imperial powers, and that had been part of their I don't want to say propaganda, but part of their language in resisting the Habsburgs and resisting the Spanish Empire. And if you look at Rembrandt, if you look at his Night Watch, his Night Watch is disorder. It's a volunteer watch full of citizen soldiers, volunteer citizens, and in a democracy, it is as though the painting is asking us to embrace the disorder of a democracy. They don't march in line like we might expect under a tyranny. In fact, if you look at the Night Watch, there's one guy in particular who's pretty funny. If you look at the painting, there's a person who's he's either in white or something very light, and just next to him, there's a guy who's looking at his musket with so much confusion. It's like it's the first time he ever picked up a gun. And if you look at Rembrandt's Night Watch, it's very easy to picture them. If they had to fight a battle, I think they would let out a cry. I think they would let out a battle cry. I really do. And if you look at Rembrandt's Conspiracy of Claudius Civilis, Again, that's him. That's the Dutch embracing their barbaric past. What's going on with Milton here? I don't know. I don't know. I wouldn't have known necessarily that he would have taken the Greek side over the Trojan side. It's it's strange to me. It's worth elucidation. I'm not exactly sure, but I do think that's interesting. And I think a little bit of this kind of cuts to Milton's own confusion as to what side he's on, where he thinks he fits. Um, so here's something that I think is, I feel like I have to deal with Abdiel right now. It has been stated that Abdiel is Milton, which is weird to me because the commentary surrounding Paradise Lost sort of suggests that actually Milton seems to have more in common with Satan and the arguments of Satan, and the arguments of Satan being somewhat similar to the arguments that had been made prior to the English Civil War. But then there are other times it's almost like the shoe's on the other foot for Milton, and he almost likens God to Cromwell, and Cromwell as a supreme ruler requires defense. He can be very confused, and I think Milton is himself confused as to what side he's on. However, if Abdiel is indeed Milton, he's a very annoying character. He keeps calling attention to the fact that he is this lone voice against this huge multitude. And he continues to, at the end of book 5, Abdiel had gone to the great conclave of Satan when he roused all his rebel angels. And Abdiel was the only person who spoke against it. So here's all this language about his bravery in being the only person there who sided with God. In book 5, line 875, fearless though alone, compassed round with foes, is used to describe the bravery of Abdiel in resisting Satan. Line 896, among the faithless, faithful only he. Oh, what a brave man Abdiel is. Line 901, nor number nor example with him wrought, to swerve from truth or change his constant mind, though single. That's the end of that quote. And though single, as in he's the only person there. He was the only person in this demonic gathering who had the courage, apparently, to say something. Now moving into book 6. I mean, Milton keeps beating this dead horse. Book 6, line 34. Universal reproach. Far worse to bear than violence. This is God talking to Abdiel and commending him. Another line. To stand approved in sight of God, though worlds judge thee perverse. Good grief, how dramatic is this? Then Abdiel himself gives himself credit. As he steps into the no man's land between the armies of Satan and the armies of God, Abdiel steps into the no man's land and credits himself with, and this is line 145, when I alone seemed in thy world, meaning Satan's world, erroneous to dissent from all, now learn too late how few sometimes may know when thousands err. And that's the end of that quote. How many lines was that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's 6 lines pertaining to Abdiel's bravery, the lone voice of good in an evil world. I hope Milton doesn't associate himself with Abdiel, or else this character is incredibly self-serving. This intercourse with Satan, just in case we're wondering, back in book 5, it lasts from lines 772 to 896. So less than 200 lines of this poem is devoted to Satan's kind of war rally, his rally of rebellion. So to emphasize so heavily Abdiel's resistance, he's in heaven. Am I wrong? I mean, what is the bravery? As far as he knows, he can't die. He's an angel. What was he afraid of? It just seems so... I can't stand this character. Okay, so there's an exchange between Abdiel and Satan. And the reason I feel like I have to talk about this is because Abdiel says something that, again, line 165, Satan says, now I see, he's addressing the armies of God. Now I see that most through sloth had rather serve ministering spirits trained up in feast and song. Such hast thou armed the minstrelsy of heaven, servility with freedom to contend. That's the end of that quote. And that goes to a lot of the things that are themes within Paradise Lost. the idea that they're free in hell and that they're chained in heaven. Okay. And I also think it's funny that he trained up in feast and song, as we've seen in book 3, as Satan is traversing the realm of chaos, they're singing and dancing in heaven. In fact, almost every time we see heaven, it results in song and dance. So from our perspective, Satan seems to be leveling a pretty funny and accurate criticism at the culture of heaven. It really does seem pretty slothful. And by the way, I hadn't emphasized this before, but why doesn't God ever do his own dirty work in Paradise Lost? Satan does his. Satan traverses hell, finds the exit, confronts sin and death, leaves the exit, walks across the plane of chaos, has to deceive an angel just to get into earth and find the Garden of Eden. He's got to jump over the wall and whisper. He goes through a lot. God just it's reasonable for us to wonder if this accusation of sloth is apt. So, but back to the idea that Satan represents freedom and that God represents servility. Abdiel responds to this, and he has this long line, and it ends with, on line 186, chains in hell, not realms, expect. Okay, now we should be inclined to like this line. When I first read it, I was inclined to like this line. Here finally we get the suggestion that Satan has been full of it this whole time. And this is Milton saying, yeah, and through his character Abdiel is pointing out, you know what? You're wrong. You're not talking about liberty. You are going to be chained in hell. Hell is just going to be more servility. Well, that's hard because now, unfortunately, we have to go back to book 2 and see that it's precisely not the case that there are chains in hell. They do not find chains. They do find realms. Here we go. All these quotes pertain to the unchained existence in hell. Now we have to go all the way back to book 2. Book 2, line 522. This is after Satan has agreed to go out into the world to corrupt man. He leaves his demons behind. And this is Milton describing what these demons do while they're waiting for Satan to come back. Okay, line 522. The ranged powers disband, right? Satan's just left. And wandering each his several way pursues. Oh, wow, these are some serious chains. Some of them in swift race contend. 529. This is their chained life in hell. They're racing. They're having races with each other. Some of them play at war games. Line 532. Fronted brigades form. Right? They march around playing war games. Some of them seem to vent their rage by, and this is the other quote, they rend up both rocks and hills and ride the air in a whirlwind. That's line 540. On line 546, others, more mild, retreated in a silent valley. Okay, silent valley? There's a silent valley in hell. This sounds like chains, not realms, expect. Is Abdiel proven right? We already know this has happened. We already read book 2. Chains, expect, says Abdiel. I don't see the chains. I see a silent valley and these more mild demons. Why is Milton describing some demons as being more mild? The rest of the quote. More mild, retreated in a silent valley, sing with notes angelical. To many a harp their own heroic deeds and hapless fall. That's the end of that quote. What an interesting line that is. So they sit there and they start composing songs, angelic songs. And there's this line there about hell being suspended with these sounds. They're writing songs to their own heroic deeds and the tragedy of their fall. So their struggle has created literature, in a sense, hasn't it? Doesn't this go to everything we've been saying? Satan is associated with tragic songs and tragic literature. In heaven, they just, they just praise. Harps and songs and dancing and hymns of praise. They don't know what this is like. They haven't endured this. Like I said, it's Satan's view privileged? Is he privileged to know what it's like to wage war with God himself? And back to Aeschylus. There's a great line in Aeschylus in the Agamemnon. Wisdom's everlasting law, that truth is only learnt by suffering it. That's Aeschylus' stance. And might not Milton agree? The mild demons are composing songs about the tragedy of their fate. What do others do? Oh, line 557. This is how wrong Abdiel is. Line 557. Others, apart, sat on a hill retired, in thoughts more elevate, and reasoned high of providence. So others are engaging in like debates. 570. Another part, in squadrons and gross bands, on bold adventure to discover wide that dismal world. All right, enough of that. They're not in chains. They're not in chains at all. They get to do whatever they want. And then in the last act of self-servingness, Abdiel gets to strike the first blow at Satan. And Satan doubles back 10 paces. All right, so the war in heaven starts. And we get to go back to having a little bit of fun. So it starts out, the first battle, it happens. And we get some great language. Storming fury rose, and clamor such as heard in heaven till now was never. Arms on armor, clashing braid, horrible discord, and the madding wheels of brazen chariots raged. Dire was the noise of conflict. Overhead the dismal hiss of fiery darts in flaming volleys flew. Both battles main with ruinous assault and inextinguishable rage. All heaven resounded. Isn't that amazing? This is the fun of Milton. I think this is where Milton, earns his keep. I think. How is this not amazing to read? Of course, the angels can't die. Cannot but annihilating die. This is right around line 348. Angels can't die. Cannot but by annihilating. Whatever the hell that means. Then Milton describes specific battles. Gabriel fights against Moloch. And mentions a few more, that Abdiel fights the atheist crew, Ariel and Arioch. No way, Ariel. That's funny. Ariel's a character. It's a fairy in the Tempest. I don't know where Ariel's coming in there. So the first foray doesn't exactly go Satan's way. But what happens next is he gathers themselves together and they come up with something better than what they've tried so far. And they make something technological. Sounds a lot like, missiles, something relating to gunpowder. And they create these deep-throated engines. So right around 585 is when they put these implements. They work through the night, creating these missiles, these missile launchers. I don't even know how to describe these things. So here we go. They leveled these, and all heaven appeared from those deep-throated engines belched, whose roar emboweled with outrageous noise the air, and all her entrails tore, disgorging foul their devilish glut, chained thunderbolts and hail of iron globes. My God, I'm sorry. This is the main entree of Paradise Lost. How can you not love these lines? So these spirits are getting bowled over. They are getting chased back. And what do they do? They start lifting up the hills and mountains in order to respond to this. The angels start lifting up hills. They pluck. This is line 644. They plucked the seated hills with all their load, rocks, waters, woods, and by the shaggy tops, uplifting bore them in their hands. Amaze, be sure, and terror seized the rebel host. When coming towards them, so dread they saw the bottom of the mountains upward turned. Amazing. And they get hit. They throw these mountains at them. They're not bluffing. Look, a great line here. 669. And now all heaven had gone to rack, with ruin overspread. So heaven itself is tarnished. It's not heaven right now, is it? And of course, Milton can't help but interject language that doesn't blame God, but he's just reminding you that, you know, he's reminding you kind of passively, don't blame God. So the Almighty Father, consulting on the sum of things, foreseen this tumult and permitted all. That's at 674. Permitted all. He's allowed all this to happen. And we find out that the reason why he has allowed the battle to escalate to this extent is because this is his chance to show his son is powerful, to show that his son deserves his place. This is why. So line 700, and he's talking to his son. For thee I have ordained it, and thus far have suffered, that the glory may be thine, that all may know in heaven and hell thy power above compare. It's all been for the Son. And then the description of the Son of God's chariot, on which he sits on a sapphire throne. It's really hard to picture Milton being against absolute power. Everybody is described as being on a throne. Both of these armies are on thrones. God sits on a throne, the Son of God sits on a throne, and Satan sits on a throne. We have no choice. Whoever side we take, even if we decide we want to be in favor of Satan, whatever side we choose, we serve a throne. There's something to be said, without going on another tangent, to make the comparison with Shakespeare's Tempest and the character Caliban and what his choices are. The chariot of paternal deity is a chariot that the Son of God sits on, flashing thick flames, wheel within wheel undrawn. There's something else I wanted to get to. So skipping over the Son of God, the further description of the Son of God's chariot. What is with the constant change of appearance of these characters? When Satan landed and, as he's brooding over his decisions, his appearance changes. Same thing for the Son. So on line 824, his appearance changes. So spake the Son, and into terror changed his countenance too severe to be beheld. This is Jesus, the Son of God. Into terror changed his countenance too severe to be beheld. Is this the image we have of Jesus? Not the image that, I always thought we had of Jesus. And before then, going back a little bit, God can predict this outcome. Jesus knows he's going to win, and the demons should know they're going to win. It is though that heaven is already recovering as the Son of God approaches the armies of Satan. Lines 783, heaven his wonted face renewed. Right? We had just seen a few lines earlier that heaven had all gone to wrack. Right? But now, as Jesus is coming, before he even gets rid of them, line 784, with fresh flowerets, hill and valley smiled. Heaven his wonted face renewed. Heaven's already recovering. This saw his hapless foes, but still abjured. So they can see. They can see they're done for, but still stood abjured. Amazing. And again, Milton leaves the idea that God deliberately didn't destroy Satan. Again, we're certainly allowed to question this. So as Jesus is laying it down, he's only exerting half his strength, according to line 853. Yet half his strength he put not forth, but checked his thunder in mid-volley, for he meant not to destroy, but root them out of heaven. So he deliberately left them alive. And he strikes them backwards, and he catapults them down into hell. And they fall into the gulf. And as we get back to Raphael, who Raphael's been telling Adam this story the whole time. Isn't that nice? So, like we've been talking about, eating the fruit didn't teach Adam about good and evil. Raphael has just told him all about it. Raphael says, line 895, to thee I have revealed what might have else to human race been hid. I'm sorry, we got to hear that line. 895, to thee I have revealed what might have else to human race been hid. Milton's word order is sometimes so annoying. But anyway, he's admitting perhaps he overstepped his agency, right? He's an agent of God, and perhaps he has exceeded what he was authorized to do. And here we go, line 900. He who envies now thy state, that's Satan, who now is plotting how he may seduce thee. That's great to tell that Adam is supposed to be this innocent, ignorant, pre-fallen man. And here's Raphael. Just by the way, Satan is now plotting how he may seduce thee. Isn't that incredible? So that's it. The war in heaven's over, and we're on. Next 2 books we're going to do in one podcast. God creates the earth. Here we go.